every business is actually the same. You've got a product or a service that you have to market and sell, and then you want return customers. Most founders will know this, but people is probably the most important thing in any business. I mean, I've been hiring people for over 20 years now. It doesn't matter what you're hiring them for. But startups specifically, I'm yet to meet an engineer that doesn't have opinions and thoughts and ideas on better ways to improve the business or the product or whatever it is, or go to market parts of the product. I think the key thing, as whether it's a CEO or whether it's just a leader in the business, is
welcome to the DevReady Podcast, where we're helping non-techs build great tech. Always like to reach out to a variety of different people on LinkedIn, etc. of the world, and ran into Jarren, who has been around startups and advisory through Startmates and a number of different things, ran his own startups as well. Just having an open conversation around his journey, what he's learned across it, and then touch upon, we will, during the podcast, around how to maybe get the right people into your environment as you look to grow a startup business. Jarren, thank you for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Hey, Andrew. Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Let's tell the audience a bit about you. Now, your accent gives you away from a South African background, but let's talk about how you're in Oz and what's the journey been like in the world of startup.
I always hope that the accent doesn't give me away and that it's been softened by being years out of South Africa, but I guess it does. So I won't kind of spend too much time in my background, but yeah, I did grow up in South Africa. I went to university there, and I actually did a very hard right turn out of university. I studied marketing, advertising, and communications, and I spent 6 weeks in an ad agency, and I hated every single moment of it. And I jumped out, and I then actually went into hospitality and running restaurants for about a couple of years. In that space is where I learned, I think, two really important things. The first thing was like how much I actually loved like the customer and how important a customer is to a business. But also, just by speaking to people, you actually start to realize kind of where problems are in the world. And now, like, it's quite common. A lot of entrepreneurs go, oh yeah, I found, like, I'm solving this problem for this people. But just from being in restaurants, you get to obviously meet a lot of people. So from working in that space, I actually realized, speaking to a lot of restaurateurs, that there were gaps in the market that I was seeing when I was in the US and the UK. I have family in both places, so I was traveling. And I thought South Africa was a little bit behind. I could kind of bring some of these tech products to South Africa. So we kind of brought a bunch of different solutions into hospitality. Mm-hmm. And that was, I guess, my first kind of foray into being an entrepreneur, way before I was even knew it was called that. And I was like very young on that journey. Like, I didn't have really the right experience. I was kind of just like door-to-door selling, then going in, servicing the clients and kind of setting things up and winging it as I went. And then I would order a new system once I sold the system and just kind of go like that.
So in terms of just to go back a little bit. So you jumped out of marketing after 6 weeks. Why hospitality? Was it just easy to get into, just wanted to try something? What was it about hospitality that drew you there?
So I probably not unlike a lot of people in their teens, although maybe these days it's much easier to create side hustles. But I wanted to make extra cash so I could travel and do things. Just
pay some bills, get some money in.
Yeah, man. So I used to, I waited in a restaurant for a while, and actually it was a really interesting restaurant in there. We actually got paid commission on like certain things that we sold in the restaurant, like drinks and other activities and stuff that we sold.
Oh, that's different. Yeah, I was a part of a restaurant, didn't see that. It's a good idea.
Exactly. So I actually played for like a few overseas. I played for 6 weeks, like touring Brazil based on doing that.
Oh, brilliant.
But I kind of realized that I was pretty good at hospitality. And then when I stepped out of this like advertising marketing space, I was like, I just didn't know where to go. And I met somebody who just had known me from when I was in that space. And they said, hey, just come and, I need a manager for my restaurant. Come and run my restaurant. I've got a lot of things I want to do. Come and run the restaurant. I know you're good with people. I've seen you operate. Just come and do it. And I was like, you know what? Like, while I'm kind of just deciding what I'm going to do, am I going to go back and study, do other things? I've just spent 4 years studying graphic design and communications. Like, what am I going to do? So I went and started running restaurants. And I mean, that was like waking up at 4:30 in the morning to serve breakfast and then closing the restaurant at 10 o'clock.
It's early. It would be early starts. Yeah. I did some after hours work when I was at uni, but that's about it. So, it's actually not a bad environment to learn how to speak to people, get to connect with customer. I think it's important what you just said, connect with customer. And yeah, you're getting feedback all the time. So it's, feedback comes. If you do something wrong, you generally get some interesting feedback in a restaurant environment. So some people aren't shy in terms of providing feedback. So it's a good thing, though. But in the early stages when you're young, you're thinking, whoa, what's happening in this space? So, but you learn, and you learn how to deal with people, and it's a good environment to actually pick up how to work with a customer, really.
Correct. A lot of now that I can kind of look back, a lot of learning and skills and development and stuff came from just being in that space. You kind of like forced also to learn those things, like a customer's like in your face, like shouting at you. There's not email, there's no phone call, like they're there, and you have to learn how to like damage control pretty quickly, and then make people happy. And then you also, it's a similar thing. You've got to every business is actually the same, really. Like you've got a product or a service that you have to market and sell, and then you want return customers because that's like renewable.
If they don't come back, then it's harder to get a new customer than it is to keep an existing one.
Exactly. And then you want referrals. So like if you learn how to like service them well, give them great food, and bring the whole thing together in a great experience, which is not unlike a lot of what we do in the business world, you then get people coming back. You get them telling their friends, and that was, I guess, before like viral and everything. But yeah, there's a lot of learnings and things that happened in those days that I use kind of still as my base today, which is great.
So how did that take you into the first tech product? So what was the gap that you saw? Was it something offshore, overseas you saw that brought to South Africa, or what was it? Yeah,
so what we actually noticed was, it was actually a pet peeve of mine working in restaurants, is when the food was ready and it was sitting at the hatch or like under the warmer and things like that, you would often hear in a restaurant the chef would shake that bell. And you'd hear ding, 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 so that the waiter or waitress would know to come and collect the food for the table. And it like drove me. It was so inefficient. It was also really annoying for like the people in the restaurant. Like you kind of think they don't hear it, but they do hear it.
Yeah, it's a noise, but you get used to it, but it's there. Yeah, you do notice it in most restaurants.
I guess, yeah, you notice it when you're in it. So when I went I was, I don't know, just on a random trip to the US, and you have them now when you go to food courts, you get those paging solutions, right? So like you kind of, what's your order number, 25, and they give you a pager and you can walk around the shop, so you can sit at the table, whatever, in the food court, and it buzzes when you come back. But what a lot of people don't know is part of those paging solutions are actually private small little pages that like waiters and waitresses can use on their hip. And the chef in the kitchen...
so they buzz if something... Yeah.
And then there's like different buzz things that can come through. So it's like pick up your food, or like clear plates or things like that. So we understood, and I happened to operate in some really large restaurants where, there was like live bands or DJs or like events and things where it's actually really hard. The waiters and waitresses can't hear what's going on in the kitchen. They're too far away, or it's just too loud. So we kind of thought, hey, there's this great opportunity. Could we bring these to South Africa and launch them? Yeah, and that was like the first kind of, I guess, like tech. It was tech. It used radio waves. And
what is that experience like? So you obviously had hardware as well as software.
There was no software.
There's more hardware. So it was just you brought the package and how did you do it? What was it like?
So the software was like you had to plug these, which were physical machines, into your laptop or your PC to be able to program them, right? Because you had to like program the different things. But it was really rudimentary. It was like you would hold down the button and like, I mean, I'm pretty sure it was very close to like DOS based stuff, like Windows like 3.1. It was like super basic.
It was a complete hardware sale. It was, this is the option, this is a margin you could make on it.
Yeah, we did all the programming on our side. We didn't let the restaurateurs, because they didn't care about stuff like that. We would come in and we would...
So you set it up for them. Yeah,
that was part of like onboarding. We would do the setup for them. Yeah.
Okay, no, fascinating. That's, I understand the door-to-door piece, because you just go from restaurant to restaurant, explain what the problem is. So how was that? What was that like, that experience? How long were you in it for? What was the success of that? What did it look like for you? What did you learn?
So I think we were too early to market. So it had a bunch of issues. Part of them was like, I just wasn't that skilled enough yet at like sales. I didn't realize like I needed to be doing volume. I couldn't like sell one, install one, sell one. And then also I was the one like servicing these things. And we realized that like sometimes the frequency wouldn't work. And if there were too many levels in a restaurant, you had to put like repeaters in. And there were all these troubleshooting things. But again, I was bootstrapping myself, and there just wasn't enough like time. And in South Africa, nobody had those paging solutions yet, even in food courts and things. And that was actually the better part of the system. Like right now, it's one of those things that the bell wasn't great, and in big things it wasn't great. But actually, did they really need it solved that way? And would they pay for it?
Big enough problem.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't like you can kind of get communication, and people have been servicing restaurants and hospitality and things for decades before that without it.
A long time. Yes.
I guess that whole part, and maybe we weren't like really smart enough, or I wasn't smart enough to pivot at the time and think of, hey, I should be actually going to food courts where people want to walk around the shops while they're waiting for their food, like I saw in the US. I just wasn't operating in that kind of, I guess, space. I was more in the restaurant space, not in the fast moving like takeaway arena. But that's, I guess, like I should have pivoted into that, and that's the learning. One of the learnings is I should have just seen where.
Oh, hindsight's a wonderful thing. We could all be could have mined Bitcoin in 2010.
You don't want to like teach people.
Correct. Yeah. No. Where did that lead you to then? So, what after you finished the restaurant business? Did you shut it down? Did you sell it? What did you do with it? Because obviously you've got customers now. What do you do now?
No, so we pivoted. So then actually my partner and I at the time, like we pivoted, and then we actually started doing coffee machines and coffee distribution to corporates.
That's a big pivot. Yeah,
big pivot.
Completely different direction.
Totally, but because of the connections we had made, and also working at the restaurant, it was like a really high end. We had really very wealthy businessmen and women that were coming to the restaurant every single day. So again, talking to people, and what we realized is like, coffee in South Africa wasn't like it is now. It wasn't like the way Australia is, but people still wanted decent coffee, but there weren't hundreds of coffee shops around. You would have to kind of go to a restaurant, or most people would just make like instant coffee at home, or they were like really expensive machines. Now there's a lot of like Jira and Gajah, all those like kind of automatic machines. But nobody had them in their offices. And there were lots of small businesses, like really wealthy businesses, and they had people coming over that they wanted to be able to give them really good coffee. But they're expensive. The machines, probably $4,000 or $5,000, which in Rand's terms in South Africa was pretty expensive. So we realized what we could do is we had a joint venture with a finance company, and the people would take these coffee machines, which we would look after and service, but we would actually distribute coffee beans to them, and that's where we would make the money. So we would charge them for the beans. A certain amount of beans they would.
So consumable sides.
That's right. So interestingly enough, not like tech at all, but I guess it was like another startup that we launched.
But it's amazing where you can go in business, and I think people get a little bit lost in it when they start something. They think that's all they might be doing. And I think you've got to be open to what's around you too, and just be open to pivot, because that is a completely different direction. You're selling hardware tech, moving to now we're selling coffee beans effectively, and just leasing out the hardware, I'm assuming? Is that what you modeled?
Yeah, that's exactly. It was a lease model. It was like, they paid us and we serviced the machines and sent them coffee beans and things like that. And I don't want to spend too long on this, because the next kind of part of the journey is it's very like entrepreneur and startup, but it's not actually tech. So I then also kind of from that, I actually pivoted to start a franchise for a purified water and water purification company. And then I moved to London because I wanted to get out of South Africa. And then I was in the UK. I was in online gaming and casinos for about 6 years. That was actually my first, I guess, like deep into what I would call actual tech. So although it's gaming and casinos, I was very heavily involved with, what were the games that they were creating? What did the platform look like? How do we accept payments? How do we use SEO to drive like monster amounts of traffic into the casino, which is players, but the equivalent of that is like, how do you drive people onto your product or your landing page and things like that now? So I worked in that for a long time, and I kind of worked a bunch of roles through marketing, account management, and then I was a country manager for many years. And then I met and married an Aussie girl in that time, and that's how I've ended up in Australia. And you've obviously got you're in your daughter's room today. How many kids do you have? I've got 2 little girls. 2
little girls. Oh, congrats. So they're good fun having children around the house. They keep you on your toes, like a startup. You're learning all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. I've written a newsletter on it before, but kids are probably the hardest job in the world.
Yeah, I would say so.
Like, because you just every day you don't know what you're going to get, and you have to learn something new.
And they're pivoting and evolving all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
They're throwing something new at you, and you just got to, how do I react to that? And then it's a whole education journey, but for you and for them. So it's interesting.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then when I started in Oz, which is 11 years now, that's when I started in tech startups. So I've been through a bunch. I was a product manager. I then started building customer success teams, moved towards more operations, health tech, construction tech, quite a bit of hospitality tech. And then, I was the CEO of a hospitality tech startup for a while. And then since then, I've kind of been consulting and helping startups from a bunch of like different angles, because I've been exposed to a lot of things over the years.
A lot of different things. Yeah, so in terms of what drives you into this startup realm, because it is a high growth, high velocity space, what do you love about it? Because you seem to be continuously involved in it. What drives you to it?
I actually think the thing that drives me the most is how I love that like scrappy, you just don't know what you're going to get. There's always something that needs tweaking, needs working on. And like, there's just no kind of opportunity to just...
It's never done, is it?
Yeah, you can't just like chill out and like let it coast. Like there's always like craziness going on. And, you've got to have this, I guess, like high tolerance for that type of environment. But I actually really enjoy that. I enjoy like solving all the problems. And, every day, something that you work on, tomorrow you can see the fruits of what you worked on, and they can be tiny little things, but
you get feedback right away, right?
Exactly, that's the right word. Yeah, feedback. So that's, I think, probably the key thing of why I love working in startups. I mean, there's all the things about solving cool problems and tech and all the new things coming out in the world, but I really love like working with founders and startups, because it's just so like I love that scrappy, like in the weeds, doing all the things.
Now, let's talk a bit about the area of getting the right people behind a startup. So as we look to grow and evolve, and you mentioned CEO, some bigger tech plays, what's some of the things around a startup that you've learned? Because as a business grows in the startup space, what I found is you may lose people because they don't really want to be on the journey as it starts to maybe corporatize, if that's the model that you're going on, or you have to really think a little bit differently. What does it mean for you from when you're attracting people to a startup business to support you in one, growth, two, product would probably the couple of angles, because if it's tech-based, there's really two parts of it. How do we serve a customer, and how do we make sure the product's the best it can be to really service that customer to the best it can be? So tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think hiring, or actually people, most founders will know this, but people is probably the most important thing in any business. I mean, I've been hiring people for over 20 years now. It doesn't matter what you're hiring them for, but startups specifically, because your room for error is so much smaller than in a bigger business. So, you have to be able to kind of identify what you need really well, articulate that, and then find the right person that not only fits the kind of the checked boxes, but what I found really important, and it's, I love building relationships, but I think the very key thing, especially early stage startups, is finding people that actually are aligned with your culture. And that those things can actually break a startup. You've only got 5 to 10 to 15 people, one or two people that are just not aligned with the company or not aligned with the vision of the founder can wreck the whole boat.
They ruin the whole thing. Yeah,
totally.
Especially early 3 to 5, 10 people in a business. Yeah, a couple of people that are doing their own thing can impact customer, impact product direction.
100%. And it's tough for a founder, because you want, for what you can kind of afford, you want the best talent you can bring in. And if you meet someone that's like shoots the lights out, but you actually you've got this feeling that maybe they're not going to culturally fit in your business, it's really hard to say no, or to kind of go another route. And you may have to have someone who's like perfect for culture, and then be able to coach them on some other things that they need. And that's really hard to weigh up as a founder.
In terms of hiring for culture, we're actually around a startup at the moment, supporting one, which is looking to how do we operationalize culture. Very fascinating space, and how do we drive culture and create behaviors around it, because not everyone brings their own values and belief systems to a business, but sometimes you've got to put a different hat on. So how do we train that and evolve that, because not everyone's going to have the same belief system. That's impossible, or value system personally, but how do we bring a value system professionally and collectively to work towards a mission? It's an interesting dynamic, and getting it right can be just everything works really well. Getting it wrong, like you said, can really impact the business and stagnate it. In terms of getting the right hires from a culture perspective? What are you looking at when you're hiring? Because it's always a gut feel is what I find most people go on, but is there something a bit more strategic around that when you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I'll say your gut feel is probably a very good place to start. You can't qualify a gut feel. You can't put like a framework to a gut feel.
No, you can't. It's tough. Yeah, it is tough.
But so I actually do have a framework. I've got, most of my career in hiring, there's certain roles that you need to hire where you actually have to do very specific like aptitude testing, and maybe like engineering is one. So if we've hired engineers before, you kind of you have to do certain skill testing to make sure that do they work in the right code base as you, do they understand whatever you're working in, etc. Kind of building.
They can deliver the outcome.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But a lot of other roles, and probably I'd say most roles within a company besides one or two, you need to be able to assess somebody's culture, how they communicate, how they talk to people internally, how they're going to communicate if they kind of are customer facing. And I actually believe that a lot of your business should be customer facing. I don't believe in holding people away. Even your product managers and your engineers at some point should be meeting your customers because they're really important. So
the closer they are to the customer, the better they understand the impact, the problems. Yeah. And you'll find that engineers and especially product owners they have to be in front of customers. If they're not getting feedback from customers, what are they making decisions on? It's a fascinating, just internal ideas.
Yeah. So totally, one of the companies I worked with, we actually implemented like a show and tell type thing where one of the customer success managers would bring in one of their customers once a month, and we would do like a live show and tell where the customer would talk about how they use the product in their business and the challenges and things. And that was actually for devs. We'd bring in all the devs and the product managers so they could hear the customer talking, but they would get to be able to ask the customer questions about how they use the product, how they're solving things. And a lot of customers, especially in SaaS, you find out that people use your product like this.
There's some weird and wonderful things that people do when you look behind a product.
You'll hear an engineer that will hear that and they'll go, like I can fix that so that you can go like this tomorrow. And it's like one line of code. And that communication, and I would just see the engineers when we left that space, like how energized they were, because often in the engineering is they're so removed, they're sitting like coding and sales or CSMs, and
it's a validation piece. They're seeing value that they're delivering, and I think no one wants to write code that sits on a shelf or doesn't get used, or
100%.
And that's another thing. If an engineer is sitting there for a year and they don't have any feedback around usage or what people are doing, they can get demotivated because what are they actually doing? Ticking off a Jira task,
and what better feedback than from your customer? There's nothing then better. So kind of sorry to like loop back in, but that's actually part of it. So the framework that I look for is like how do people communicate? I've used for years, like I've got a really interesting like interview, depending on the role that I'm interviewing for, but one specific I forgot the word now. So we have different phases of the interview. Like one interview phase is very specifically around just getting to know the person and then their cultural fit. And then I ask like a range of like really out there, weird, strange, conversational type questions. Okay. And I know that if I'm having to look at the time and we are like, I'm not even halfway through and we have like way past the hour of the interview, this person is probably like already on the way to being a good fit. Whereas if we shoot through these questions and I'm like 15 minutes in and there's been like hardly any conversation, there's been no kind of asking questions back, then I'm like, okay. And I'm not saying they're not great, but they may not be the right fit for the type of culture we want to build, depending on the life cycle stage of the business that we're in.
It sounds like you're looking to build a heavy communicational culture, people that are always engaging, asking questions, being curious, and you have in that space of tech, you must be. If you're building new things and evolving, the curiosity is one of the pivotal values that we value as a business.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I often see, I've worked with lots of startups and even scale-ups, and when companies start to scale, one of the key things that gets lost, or the biggest challenges when I speak to them, they're like, what's happening in business? Like communication. When they're like, everyone, like the business, like the departments are now all in silos. And I'm like, because the communication is lost somehow. There's nobody owning that, those cadences, and I'm not talking about meetings. I'm just talking about like how you set up these rhythms in your business. That piece of communication, I think it's really important. So if you kind of bring the people in that want to be able to have that, and some people are introverts, they don't like to be like open and talking about everything, but they want to be involved. They want to be able to hear things and be able to have a space to ask questions. those are people I think that I'd like in my business.
In terms of encouraging that communication and open communication, that requires a lot of trust in a business too. So how do we drive trust? And if I'm going to put my opinion on the line, people aren't going to push it down. So you've got to be conscious of that and encourage it. And I find that across, especially engineers, they may not be the most conversational people. It's more about how do you ask good questions on them to really add value, because they can probably sit in a room of 10 people and sit quietly quite easily. Yeah. So it can be a bit of a tough one. We got a bunch of engineers in the background that are generally quiet people. Not all. That's probably pigeonholing. But they like to get behind the computer and do what they do and just derive value that way. And it's not everyone that's an engineer that wants to get out and have a conversation with a client, but they do appreciate the feedback. Let's put it that way.
And also, I'm yet to meet an engineer that doesn't have opinions and thoughts and ideas on better ways to improve the business or the product or whatever it is, or go-to-market parts of the product. I think the key thing, as whether it's a CEO or whether it's just a leader in the business, is you have to find the right way to leverage your kind of different personalities in your business. So if you have like introverted engineers, like they have ideas and things, you just have to find the right way.
Yeah, how do you get it out of them?
Yeah. And maybe it's only sitting with their team. Maybe it's just sitting with you. There's obviously lots of different ways to solve problems. But I think as a leader or a manager, or whatever you want to call it, like I think that's your responsibility, is to figure out how you get that communication out of your teams. And to your point, like as soon as you start building that trust, it may be in like this little space, but as soon as you build that trust, then it actually does start to spread, and then other people in the company get involved, and suddenly that engineer who didn't speak is now talking up in meetings and asking questions and giving ideas.
Yeah, the trust is pivotal. So in the end, it's just systems and putting in, like I think you said, cadences and practices that you put around the business on comms. I think the strategy around getting clients in a room with engineers is actually quite a decent one. In our business, we could take a bit of learning from that. We probably don't get most of our engineers in front of too many clients. It's probably keep it on a lead basis. So it's something we could learn. I don't know if you know much about us. We're a consulting business. We run a couple of products, one in pharmacy and one in the space of health space. So in terms of, there's the product side, but then you're building other people's products. So there's a bit of everything going on. So how do you still drive outcomes and support that as well? So it's a bit of a nuanced team and different variations on what they're delivering.
One of the things that I kind of preach about is, and most tech founders call themselves like product-led. I like to talk about being customer-led, and very specifically how the culture internally in your business is often like a mirror reflection of the culture you have with your clients. And like, it's a really interesting thing. Like if you kind of think about it as you meet people and you go and look at their businesses and stuff, how they treat each other and communicate and stuff internally is often very similar to how they do it with their customers or their clients, or whatever kind of you call that side of the business for you.
I find and I would agree with you on that, the customer led versus product led. What does product led actually mean? Would be a question I have for you. What does it mean? Like, what you lead by? We lead with the product, so you're just selling product and pushing it down people's faces. What does it actually mean to be product led? Because I find it difficult. As soon as we can get an MVP out, we just want customer feedback, and you need customer feedback to evolve it. And you'll find that people don't want that. They want this, or they're learning this, and they might validate what your ideas are internally, or they might push you down a different path, change your roadmap, pivot. But if the thinking is correct, that's great, because you've done some market research. But the customer-led is the only way I see how you build a great product. I don't see any other way. Yeah,
I agree. I mean, many years ago, I was a product manager, then a head of product. And we said, you have to be product-led. And I don't know, maybe we're much further down the line in tech, where like everything is now tech-focused versus the other way around. So, you had to think about, like, we got to do everything from a tech perspective. We've got to build the product. It's got to work. There's got to be, all these connections.
It's heavy infrastructure focus, making sure scalability is there.
Whereas now, like, all that stuff is just standard. Like, most people are building some sort of tech or software or hardware or IoT type of product, AI now. So maybe people don't talk about being product-led as much. But I totally agree with you. I see that, like, I don't know how to define what product-led is, because that seems like an obvious thing to me, but customer-led is not so obvious. Like, what does that look like? And that can look different in every type of business. And I don't think a lot of businesses talk about it enough. But to your point, everybody has customers. So how is that not your driving?
I hope you got some customers. Otherwise,
don't
don't build behind a curtain. It can be very dangerous. Yeah. In terms of getting in front of customers, in terms of your experience, what have you found has been the quicker, in my mind, you can get in front of customers, the better. In terms of massaging that conversation even early before you have a product, especially when you're in your really early phases. A lot of founders I see a little bit reluctant to do that, or can be reluctant to push their ideas out there. Love your thoughts on that, because I see the more we speak about what we're doing, the more impact we're going to have on others and learning, which is really the goal here. We're just trying to solve and add value and create value, and the only way you do that is by circling ideas and concepts. How do you, when you're in a product, it's a bit easier and you've got customers. When you're really early, what approaches have you found work well?
It's a great question. I think a mindset that I would use is, especially when you're early on, obviously you want to be selling whatever you're building, right? But if you change the mindset that in the beginning you want to have conversations, but it's not about sales, it's discovery and learning, and maybe educating even. And there's one key thing: everybody likes to talk about themselves. Like, I don't care who you are in the world, and especially if you're B2B and you're solving like a business owner. Like, I'm yet to meet a business owner that could not talk about themselves and their business for days on end.
Yeah, that's their pocket. That's where they're comfortable, because they're in it all the time. Reality is, as an owner, you're in it. Whether you're at home cooking, playing with the kids, you still got it lingering in the back of mind. Yeah.
Exactly. So the challenge there is actually like not getting them to talk about like their problems and challenges, is actually just finding the time. But usually if you kind of leading with, there's no sales involved here, this is discovery, there's problems that we are trying to solve within your industry or your vertical or whatever that is, we'd love to have a discussion. I think most people are open to having a discussion and talking and giving you information. Like, there's, as a business owner, if somebody approached me for something that they wanting to build, and I've had multiples like this, there's no real downside. You're just losing time, I guess. So if people are time poor, that's a challenging thing. But other than that, like, most people are happy if somebody's solving the problem in their space that's a headache for them. They'd probably be happy to tell you like why it's a problem for them, or how you could solve it for them, or how they do solve it now the way they do. So yeah, being, I think, kind of them versus you is probably a big thing.
Now, that's just actively reaching out to people in the market, and not everyone's going to be open to that. But there are definitely going to be people out there that are happy to share opinions and give you thoughts and what's where. And you will learn in the early stage research. You're going to learn a lot more from direct people that are on the ground and involved in the problem space or what you're trying to build, etc. I find you just got to, from what I've learned doing that process, is not influence the conversation too much in terms of this is what we're doing and this is how we're going to do it.
Exactly.
It's more how do we, I think discovery is a key word that you mentioned there. How do you undiscover what they're doing in a space without leading them too much? Because you don't want to influence the conversation, especially in the early stage stuff, if you don't have something to show or you're just conceptualizing. That's something that I've learned, that I've made some mistakes in the past where this is what we're going to do, this is going to do it, what's good about it, what's not. And it's the conversation going to be a bit dry if you're not really talking about them, which is a good point.
Yeah, ask lots of questions. Yeah, it's about them versus you. You'll get, most of the time you'll get, listen, I mean, not every time, some people are not going to give you what you want, but most of the time you'll probably end up finding the information that you wanted without going down the path, but you'll also find some little bits of gold that you didn't think you'd expect if you just keep it open.
No, that sounds really good. Jarren, really great to connect and join us on the DevReady podcast. Coming on and sharing your journey, your experience, a couple of things we can learn about how we might hire for culture, I think is critical. We've had people around our business that probably stayed along too long because they weren't the right cultural fit, and then getting people out of the business if it's not a culture fit is harder. So if you can hire them early days from a culture fit, makes a lot more sense. Thanks for jumping on. Really appreciate your time and coming on the DevReady podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. It was great. I enjoyed the conversation. Thanks, Andrew.
Cheers, Jarren.